All right, everyone. Hi, welcome to the Granite Mountain Movie Club. I'm your host. I go by Granite. I'm joined today by Jared Klickstein, who has just, well, it's not out yet. He's written a book. It'll be out in, I think, June. And you guys can all go click. I'm going to put a link in the description. You can all check out the book, go do the pre-order and all that. But I brought him in today to talk about, we're going to talk about the movie Shot Caller from 2017. And the reason he's here to talk about that is because I think some of what I saw in that movie is stuff that he knows about personally, and which is, I think, part of what his book covers. And of course, if you've seen Shot Caller, that's a movie about a guy who goes to prison, has to join a gang. In his case, he's joining I guess it's the Aryan Brotherhood, or at least a white race gang. So anyway, Jared's here because Jared has some insight into that stuff. How you doing, Jared?
Hey, I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to talk about Shot Caller.
Yeah. So tell the audience a little bit about your background. So you've got this book. What's kind of the premise of the book, and then what was, I guess, the experience that, I mean, your life is the experience, but what was the series of events that led up to this book?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book. It's called Crooked Smile. It comes out in June 25th. It's basically a memoir. It's part memoir, part public policy critique around the issues of homelessness and addiction. I'm a former homeless drug addict. I was raised by heroin addicts, eventually became addicted myself, and wound up homeless in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, and then homeless on Skid Row a few times for pretty long periods of time. And then basically it's the story of how I got out of that. I'm obviously not homeless anymore, not addicted to drugs anymore. And basically just got a bunch of life stories that were pretty entertaining and hilarious and dark. And people just kept saying, write a book. So I've been writing a book for a few years. I've been sober 6 years, and it took about 2 years to actually get a book deal and then get it finished. And now it's on its way. But, obviously we all know we're not, we're familiar with the failure of places like California, where they've just failed in addressing addiction and homelessness. And if they've done anything, they've really just encouraged it to flourish. So the book is a large critique of the state in that regard.
Yeah. So let me know if this is accurate, or this is a fair portrayal of some of what you talk about. But I've heard you interviewed other podcasts and things, and I read the intro to your book. That's all I've read so far. But let me know if it's fair to say that you're a critic of kind of the mainstream approach to homelessness and drug addiction, in which there's kind of a lot of, I guess it would be like enabling at the government level, the state level.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'm definitely a critic of the direction we've gone probably the past 10 years. I think, we were pretty hard on crime and hard on addiction and homelessness through the late 90s into the 2000s, but it didn't work perfectly. So sort of like mainstream politics, we're saying, well, okay, this clearly hasn't worked, so we need to try a different approach. But it actually, now we're finding out, it actually did kind of work better than what we have experimented with the last 10 years. And I'm not advocating we just go right back to what we were doing before, but I kind of have like a new approach. But it's definitely not like a soft on antisocial behavior approach.
Yeah. So I had a friend. I have a friend. I mean, he's still my friend, but I don't really know where he is. But when I go back to my hometown, I meet up with his brother, and we go and find him. Sometimes we find him, sometimes we don't. So he's living out on the streets, and he comes from a wealthy family. He's got a lot of resources. He could go home if he could abide, the house rules. And one of the times when I met up with him, and he's a drug addict, and he's got some other mental health problems, but he chooses and prefers to live on the street. And one of the times I met up with him, we were kind of talking about the war on drugs, and his take. He's like, dude, we need a literal war on drugs. We need like guys with AKs on the corner shooting dealers. Like that's what he's like. Nothing else is going to get me and people I associate with to stop. Like that's what I need. Um,
Yeah, I mean it's hard to hear that, but it's unfortunately relatively true. I mean, they did it in Florida. There was a drug called Flocka that was just making people go insane, and people were buying it on the dark web. And the DEA came in, and they were just like putting people in prison for 20 years for selling it. And it disappeared within 6 months. I mean, no one's ever
mm,
even heard of it.
yeah,
Like they can do it. Uh,
yeah. So it's. I mean, I guess in your story, if I recall correctly from other interviews I've heard, you did end up going to prison. Is that correct?
I actually didn't go to prison. I fought a prison case for 6 months and actually did my time in LA County Jail, which I mean, some people would argue that it's worse than prison. Um, but I did 6 months. I'm not trying to steal valor or anything. I'm not like I'm not like one of these guys from Shot Caller, but I was with the guys from Shot Caller. I mean, I observed it for 6 months, and I'm also not an advocate for just throwing everyone in jail. I think if you want to do drugs in your apartment and not bother anyone, you should be legally allowed to do that. But once it's like infringing on the civil liberties of other people and just sort of a detriment to society, I think there needs to be consequences of, probably in the form of mandated long-term drug treatment and job training. But yeah, if you're
Oh,
selling fentanyl, I think you should go to prison.
maybe you could break that down for people who've not interacted with like the system who aren't familiar with the law. What are kind of the different levels, I guess, of incarceration?
Well, in my case, I was sort of already in the period of time when everything was essentially decriminalized. So I actually couldn't get to jail. I mean, I just kept getting high in public, stealing. I was a professional shoplifter, robbing job sites, breaking into cars, robbing people. And I couldn't do more than like a day in jail. I mean, they basically just hold you for 24 hours and then they release you on your own recognizance. And
Hmm.
I was incredibly fortunate to finally get arrested and face some prison time. Uh, and the way that happened was I actually got mugged and I defended myself against a mugger and they got me with assault with a deadly weapon. So ironically, that's how I ended up actually doing time.
Oh, okay. So that, and like you say, this was California, and there was no actual penalty for like maybe possession or use of drugs. It was just the violence.
Yeah, there was no penalty for possession, for sales, for theft. Um, Really, just violent crime, and I wasn't even violent. I just pulled out a knife on a guy that sucker punched me and took my cell phone or my Obama phone.
That was another homeless person, I assume.
It was another homeless person. We got into a fight in a Panda Express, and he sucker punched me while I was on my Obama phone and took it. And I took out a knife and basically asked for it back. And but it was on camera, and the police ended up coming, and that was it.
Okay, and then you said it was county jail, or
Yeah, L.A. County Jail, which is where everyone goes to sort of while they're awaiting trial, or say that you're doing a long prison term and you have to go to court. You would go to county jail for like 2 weeks, and or if you're just continuing to fight your case, you're going to be in county jail. So it's filled with people that are murderers and stuff, and it's also filled with a lot of people that are just there for a short period of time. But you don't get yard. You don't really get yard. You get like they have a rooftop with like a basketball court, but it's not like it is in Shot Caller, and there's just generally less space.
hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah. But so you're around guys who would have later gone into the system where they would have been there for a long time, and they would have they would have been the kind of people who would join these gangs, right?
Well, the gangs were very active in county jail, and there was also a thing in place in Los Angeles where at the time, if you got a prison sentence, but it wasn't for a very violent crime, they wouldn't even send you to prison. You just do your prison term in LA County Jail. So that's why it is sort of a prison. I mean,
Hmm.
there's guys doing 8 years in LA County Jail.
Well, I mean, so to someone like me who doesn't have much exposure to the system, like, what's the meaningful difference, I guess, between like a county jail or I guess a state penitentiary, and then like what else would there federal? What else is there?
Well, there's prison, which is after you've been convicted and given your sentence, you would go to prison. There's county jail, where typically you're on trial. I mean, it could take years. I mean, you could just be in
Yeah.
LA County Jail waiting for your sentencing. And then there's federal prison, which is that's where you go if you're doing a crime that involves interstate, something interstate. Like if you killed someone in California and fled to Arizona or something, you might end up in federal prison, or anything really involving the internet. Usually you go to federal prison.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And which ones are like, I guess, which is the worst? Like, which is the hardest? And or does it just kind of depend on which location or within a given system you end up at, or how does that work?
Well, I only know California. California has incredibly strict rules that are made by the gangs. So the gangs completely run the California prison system and the jail system, and to some extent Arizona and Nevada. These are completely run by the Mexican gangs, and it's quite organized because of that. I don't know what prison's like in the South or the Northeast or the Midwest. I think it's a lot worse, to be honest. Even though LA has such a terrible reputation, but it's quite organized because of the gangs. So I didn't have a bad time at all. But federal is definitely where you want to go, because federal, you get to play tennis and use the computer, and you get good food. I mean, I've had friends in federal prison that can email me, and we're like emailing back and forth. It's pretty lenient in federal prison.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the movie, they are in there. There's two different facilities in the movie. So well, I guess we can go back, but like the premise of the movie, and I would encourage. I think it's a great movie. It's it's a good crime. I guess you'd call it a thriller, crime thriller.
Mm-hmm.
It follows the main guy, who's played by one of those guys from Game of Thrones. I don't even know how to say his name. Nikolai something.
Coster Waldau or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's a white collar finance guy. He causes traffic accident. He causes his friend's death. He was drunk at the time, so he faces criminal penalties. And he goes in, and in real life, in this scenario, would he actually go in kind of this type of environment, or would he? I asked this because I watched some YouTube video with some ex-convict, and he seemed doubtful that a guy like this would actually go into this environment. But
I think he would. I mean, when I went in there, I met a number of people that actually were in a very similar situation as him, like drunk driving, killed somebody. It's pretty intense when he goes into that first sort of processing place where he's still on trial, and that guy gets, I think he gets raped. Not the main character, but that other guy, and
yeah,
it's not really that. I mean, it looks like that and it feels like that, but I mean, I don't think, first of all, the rape thing, like there's a movie called American Me. I don't know if you've heard of it.
yeah, it's Edward Olmos or something, or
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's a number of like rape scenes, or sort of like insinuating that rape occurred, and someone actually got murdered that worked on that movie by the Mexican mafia because of that, because they don't do that. I mean, it's very, very, very forbidden amongst the Mexican gangs and the white gangs, and I don't know if the black gangs really have a rule about it, but this movie was pretty accurate to that. But
so that other movie, American Me, they portrayed a lot of prison rape, and then the Mexicans retaliated against some people involved in the making of the film.
yeah, I think they killed like a producer or the screenwriter or something.
Oh wow! I didn't watch that one. I almost watched it in prep for this, just because I saw it. I saw it on a list of like similar films.
Yeah.
But it looked interesting, so I added it to a list. But
Oh, it's fabulous.
okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, no,
yes,
he would be
yeah.
he would be thrown into that situation. And listen, there's fights. I mean, yeah, no, it was pretty. The movie is generally pretty accurate, actually. I think.
So I'm curious about that. So his lawyer in the movie, his lawyer gives him this advice. That there's that. It's cliched at this point. Everyone knows it's like when you go to prison, or jail or whatever. You find the biggest guy and you punch him in the stomach on day one. You make sure you don't get bullied or whatever. Like, is that a real thing? His lawyer basically tells him to do that, and he does that, and he gets the attention of what's the right way to refer to these guys? Just like the Aryan Brotherhood? Is that the right?
I would call them Peckerwoods. They were calling each other Wood. I think they were Woods, but the thing about Woods is that Woods is like the generic term for just like you're a white guy in jail or prison. Whereas if you look at like John Bernthal, he's in the
Uh-huh.
movie. He had a P9 tattoo on his neck, so he's like that's a gang, a P9,
Yeah.
Public Enemy number one. That's more of like a Aryan Brotherhood affiliated gang, or actually a Nazi lowrider affiliated gang. So all the white guys kind of like hang out together, and yeah, some are skinheads, some are P9. But like if you look at that, who's like the Bubbles, I think his name, or Bottles.
Yeah, that is
Uh,
that the guy from Sicario?
yeah, so that guy's just probably a standard Peckerwood.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe I wasn't following it correctly, but in the early part of the movie, who my impression was the Bottles was kind of the top dog among that group.
Yes, yeah, he was. So he was the shot caller. He had okay. They use a lot of terminology correctly. Like they said, he had the keys to the yard, which
Uh-huh.
means there's a lot of car metaphors in jail and prison. So keys to the yard, keys to the pad. Bottles had the keys to the yard at that at that prison, and he was probably just a standard Peckerwood. And yeah, I mean that's pretty realistic. I mean, I went in there. I'm not very big. I'm about 5'8", 170. When I went into jail, I was 5'8", 125 probably. Um, no one was picking on me, and no one, and I certainly wasn't like going to find the biggest guy to fight him. But you basically go in, and if you're white, the white guys come right up to you and they say like, "Are you rolling with us?" And you say yes. And if there's no really saying no, it's not even like pressure. It's just like, you're a white guy, you could come over here, and you basically become a Peckerwood right on the spot. At least while during your time in jail or prison. Um,
But you don't have to officially join anything.
you do, but it's not like you have to like get tattoos and like get crazy with it or anything. But every white guy in a dorm in LA County Jail or any prison is a Peckerwood, at the very least, if not a skinhead.
Yeah. So did they? So in the movie they use this term. The law enforcement uses this term validated.
Yeah.
Like that's when they, I guess, they have confirmed you are gang affiliated. But
Yes.
you could hang out with those guys and not be validated. You could
Yeah.
be.
Plenty of people are. I mean, if I mean, listen, you're in there and there's like random dads just in there that just got a couple too many DUIs. I mean, they're a Peckerwood, but they're not getting tatted up or anything, and they're not like stabbing people. But a situation happens where he kind of stumbles into a guy from another gang, a black guy, and yeah, like that, something might kick off, and you might have to fight that guy. But this is another thing. Like, there's never really. It's incredibly rare for someone from one race to fight another race without getting permission from each of their shot callers first,
Mm.
because it will kick off a race riot, and no one wants a race riot, because they take away, you get on.
I think you might. Did you cut out? Yeah, I think you cut out. After you're talking about no, you're saying no one wants a race riot, and you're going to explain.
Yeah, so no one wants a race riot, so that's where this was slightly unrealistic, in that if he had done that to that black guy, like where he accidentally bumped into them and they started fighting, he would have been recognized as having courage, I guess, but they wouldn't have been happy with him. I mean, you are not allowed to just start fighting someone from another race or another gang. You'll get punished severely for it.
I see the system. I see that there is this system in place where the races mostly stick with each other. I'm my inclination is to look at a system and assume it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
But it also sounds like most people do kind of want peace, and they do kind of want things to be chill. They want like all the whatever limited privileges they have, they want to retain them. So like what is the reason for like forming like the gangs, or at least like the racial category, or what is the reason for sticking with your race if everyone kind of wants the same thing anyway?
Um, well, I think it's long standing from many decades ago, but it's also just for protection. So this just kind of naturally happened. That it's really decided by the Mexican gangs, the Mexican mafia, the Southsiders, the Norteños. those are two like rival Mexican gangs, but they the Southsiders make the rules in California prisons, and they're very race obsessed, and you just have to kind of do what you have to fall in line with what they're doing, and it's for protection. And but this is the thing. These rules, like there's certain rules, like you have to wash your hands after you use the bathroom. And if you don't, you get severely physically beaten as a punishment. And I didn't really understand all these rules, and I sort of asked them, why do we have all these insane cleanliness rules? And they said, well, if you were to use the bathroom and not wash your hands and then touch the doorknob or something, and then a black guy saw you do that, it could start a race war. Because he's like, oh, this white boy's being nasty. He's like pissing and touching all the stuff, and so that could start a race war. And then you're not allowed to share food with black people, and which I didn't understand. But then someone explained to me, well, if you share food with a black person, someone could put pubes in the sandwich, or someone could find a hair and think that, the other race planted, pubic hair in his sandwich, and all of a sudden you got a race war. So like all these rules are just meant to prevent a race war, which sounds kind of stupid. And I'd say most people aren't even really racist. It's just, this is just what you have to do. And you're not allowed to sit on another race's bunk, and that could be because you might have a stain on your pants and you might offend this person. Whereas within your own race, it's okay to sort of offend your own race because everything's handled in house. You're not allowed to just fight someone from your own race. You would have to ask your shot caller for permission. It's a system where the shot caller is basically makes all the calls. So if you have a problem with someone, you have to bring it to your shot caller, not to that person directly. And this is just to keep the peace and keep all the privileges and keep everything rolling.
Is it possible? I mean, do they? I guess. I mean, this system must be pretty expansive. It's been around forever, but are there people who don't, through maybe some racial oddity or something, don't really fit in anywhere? And do they just are they screwed, or what happens? Like, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like an
that
unusual
happens.
race or some sort of mixed race.
Well, in California specifically, there are the woods, and or just white people, and the Mexicans, specifically the Southsiders, are linked up. So it's Southsiders and Pecker Woods are linked up. They're still considered different races, but they can share food. And then everything else is the brothers and the others. So there's brothers, and then
Uh-huh.
there's others.
Yeah.
And others are Asian, Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, Native American. Um, it's unfortunate that they're called the others, but it's just kind of the other races that make up a small percentage of the entire population. And then listen, there's people that are like black that grew up in a Mexican gang, like they're Mexican in there, and then there's half white, half black guys that are. I've seen it where they're Peckerwoods, and then I've seen a few times where there's just white guys that are brothers, because they just grew up in South Central and they're or something, and they're just they grew up in a black gang. Um, and that's just how it goes. So there are kind of these anomalies that happen.
And you would just in a scenario like that, you show up and you maybe you're a white guy, but who fits in with black guys. I just some combination of saying the right things and walking the right walk, like you're able to sort of be ingratiated into that group.
I think if you're like just a white guy that likes hip hop and black culture, you can't
Yeah.
you can't really do that. But if you're a white guy that is like validated in a street gang that is a like a Crips or a Bloods based gang, then you can do that. And there is a big target on you from the white gangs.
So you'd have to maybe know someone on the out. You'd have to know people on the outside in common. Like you'd have to have contact points or something that.
Yeah, I mean it's like that It's like that Chappelle comedy bit where it's like you ever see the white guy with the group of black guys walking down the street, like you got to be
Yeah.
most scared of the white guy because he has to prove himself. And yeah, these are like the craziest white people you've ever met, and, and
Yeah.
yeah, no, they need to be like confirmed by someone in there. Like, yeah, this guy, I know the guy that grew up with this guy, and it's not an easy path to walk.
And there's some sort of like economy around all this too, like that crosses the boundaries of the institution too. It seems like there's guys on the outside who are maybe feeding things into the the prison or the jail that gets, things that are sold. Like in the movie shows, main guy. I mean, he eventually he goes by Money. I guess we'll call him Money.
Yeah.
It shows Money. Like I don't know if you'd call it what trafficking, or he's a mule. He's got to put the heroin in the balloon. And all that. Like, is there a lot of money on the line? Is there a lot of like, or is the economy kind of all just sort of stuck within the prison, and it's more of like a favor economy and a informal economy, or is there a lot of money like going on the outside too?
Well, it's very interesting. It's like kind of like an insulated economy, and it is fascinating because a bat like cookies can be worth one soup. One soup is $1, but like
Yeah,
sometimes like you don't get cookies. It's like a Tuesday, and for some reason they didn't serve cookies, and all of a sudden cookies are worth $2. Because they
yeah.
become it's like the purest free market I've ever seen. But yeah, there's drugs. I mean, drugs do get in. The problem is that drugs in jail or prison are incredibly expensive. I mean, I'm talking like 500x street
Yeah.
prices. So it's big money. I mean, you have a little balloon of meth or heroin. I mean, we're talking about thousands of dollars. There's a lot of people that make a complete living and raise and support their family by purposely going to jail and smuggling in drugs.
Like in the movie, the main sort of uh plot device or whatever you'd call it is the sale is like this sale of guns. Like there's this soldier who's coming back from Iraq, and he's got a tip on some, or he facilitated the transport of a bunch of guns, and they're going to sell them. And he's working with these guys who are connected through the prison network and stuff. Like, and it shows that the main top shot caller, played by Holt McCallany, I think is how you say his name,
Mm-hmm.
and he like that sounds like a big sale, right? Like that, like did you hear about stuff like that, like kind of big operations that were occurring on the outside, but they were being coordinated from within?
You hear about things, but this is primarily done by the Mexican gangs and the black gangs. I mean, the I don't know how active like white gangs are on the street, like it's depicted in the movie. I mean, definitely P9 is a big time gang in like the South Bay of Los Angeles. Um, that certainly possible, but I bunked under the South Side of Shot Caller for a few months, and we talked a lot, and he explained to me basically like he was the shot caller of this dorm, but there's like a shot caller of the whole jail, and then
Yeah.
there's a shot caller of each prison in California, and then there's like one guy in like Folsom that kind of like everyone reports to him, and money gets kicked up from every level and from the street. So
And full is Folsom like the apex prison in California?
no, I just use that as an example.
Okay.
They can be anywhere really, but
I just know it's like a storied institution, because like Johnny Cash and all that.
yeah, no, definitely. And then so like what the Mexican gangs will do is like on once a week, like everyone will get their store, which means like they get their you can buy like snacks and food from the outside basically, and they come and they deliver it on Mondays, and then a Mexican guy will walk around or a South Sider will walk around with a trash bag, and everyone will put 10% of their store into that bag, and then that's the tax. So that goes to the shot caller of the dorm, and then he doesn't actually pay for his food; he just gets that. But then maybe on the outside, someone wires money to somebody in exchange for that 10%, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
okay.
it's like everyone pays their taxes somehow,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's lower taxes than the federal government, but it is funny that they have like a very organized system, whereas the Peckerwoods don't do stuff like that. And I think back in the day, we're talking like 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm sure like the Hells Angels were highly involved in drug trafficking and arms dealing, and there probably was a lot of that going on. But I don't want to speak out of turn. I didn't witness anything like that.
Yeah. And then talk about the role that the guards play. Like in the movie, I think they kind of just show one guard who I don't know if they have to rely on more than one, but they have one key corrections officer who they use for help on various things.
Yeah.
Um, that's just sort of a known and accepted thing that there's going to be some guards who operate with the gangs, right?
Yeah, I didn't really witness any of this, but there was a huge crackdown in LA County in like the mid aughts, and I believe Sheriff Baco is in prison. I think he went to prison. So this was super heavy. I mean, there was a lot of issues with the guards sort of forming their own gangs and even having connections to the street gangs on the outside, and it's just too lucrative and it's too much power. And sure, guards get paid a good wage and everything, but this happens. It's the same in rehabs. Like there's people that work at rehabs and there's something powerful about being the cool person that works at the rehab that kind of lets you do bad things and maybe smuggles in things from the outside. I mean, people are just naturally alert to they're attracted to it. So
Yeah.
I didn't witness it personally, but it's absolutely a thing. I mean, drugs get in there somehow, phones get in there somehow. Um, it's happening, and there's a lot of money to be made. So yeah, it's for
Yeah, I don't
sure.
know if you saw. Have you seen Felon? The other movie, another one
I
of the
have.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched. Yeah, I watched that one too. The guards are more featured in that one.
Yeah, so that's more similar to how LA was like 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that movie, I didn't like that one as much. It's still, I thought it was still pretty good. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, he's kind of like you could tell the director he had like these ideas, and he tried them once with Felon, and then he's like, I'm going to try a lot of these again. I'm going to redo a bunch of my first movie in shot caller. But
Yeah, no, Shot Caller's much better, I think. I didn't I actually watched Felon years ago, and then I Wikipedia'd the director right before this, and I was surprised. I couldn't believe that he also directed Felon. But yeah, clearly he just used a lot of the same ideas and made in my opinion, a much better movie. Um,
there's even some shots that are like one for one. Like remember the guys are doing like squats with another guy on their back.
yeah,
He's got like that exact shot
yeah,
through the same like bars. Like he's got it in both movies and stuff.
yeah. Well, it's a great shot and it's real. I mean, people work out with each other. There's no weights, so you really have to get creative the way that you work out. People will lay on a bunk and then someone will get on the ground and like use it as a bench, like push the whole bunk up. And people are doing that, and it seems like he just did a lot more research for the second movie. And the culture, like the South Bay Peckerwood culture, was like pretty spot on.
Yeah, on the workout thing, a lot of the guys are jacked. Like, that's just part of the? I mean, that's the stereotype is that prisoners are working out all day. Is that what you saw?
Yeah, well, you have to. I mean, it's part of the gang's rules. The Mexicans are incredibly militaristic about it. I mean, they work out every day, minimum hour, like that's the requirement. But a lot of guys work out 4 or 5 hours a day. And then, since the Peckerwoods are allies with the Southsiders, it is a requirement that the Peckerwoods also work out to be prepared for some sort of race war. And yeah, people are working out all day. And there is just a thing. I've known a lot of guys that did a good amount of time in prison, and you sort of just become permanently jacked
Yeah,
somehow. And it's a very unique version of jacked. It's like a very prison jacked.
yeah. I have heard maybe this is more of a federal prison thing, or I don't know, or it's a different thing. But I have heard about like prison environments with like high starch foods, and it's like they're kind of trying to fatten the guys up and slow them down.
For
Um,
sure.
what where because I have seen that, and I can't say too much, but I did have a job at one time where we worked with people who were reintegrating into society, and those guys were mostly fat. But
Yeah.
but I don't remember where they were coming from. Like what environment would that create? Or where would that be created?
Well, in the jail food is super heavy on starches, and yeah, you get fat. I mean, listen, they give you cookies and they give you mashed potatoes and they just give you rice, and they basically just give you a starch every meal, and it's very low quality, and people do get fat, and the people that get jacked are usually fat jacked. I mean, there's not a lot of like six packs in there, but there's like huge pecs because you
Yeah.
can basically just do push-ups. That's like the most easy, workout that you can do anywhere. But I went in at 125 and I left at 205.
Oh, that's crazy.
And sure, I was muscular, but I was fat.
Oh
I was
man.
also fat.
Um, I've watched. I think I've watched. Yeah, I've watched all the Michael Mann movies, and he talks a lot about he was always interested, especially early in his career, with like the philosopher prisoner.
Hmm.
Is that like that they portray that in this movie? Like there's books being passed around and people are reading, and um, and that's also a thing in Felon. Val Kilmer's in Felon, and he's like this wise older guy, and
Yeah.
um, that. But at the same time, I also associate prison with like low IQ, no impulse control. Maybe it's both, but what did you see?
There's a ton of young kids that clearly have low IQ and no impulse control, and uh, also just the majority of people, at least in LA, had drug problems. I mean, most of the people were doing meth, but there are kind of like the guys that have been to prison are a lot more calm and big readers. I mean, I read probably 30 books while I was in there, and there's it's very competitive to get your hands on a good book. There's wait lists. Like I said, I was the bunkie of that Southsider shot caller named Cito. He was probably like 45, 46 or something. And we talked philosophy. I mean, he was incredibly intelligent. And he was just a guy that was like, when he gets out, he just does meth and commits crimes. And then he comes in, he's kind of a calm, smart guy. And what was funny is I don't know if you know who Zachariah Sitchin is, but he
Not
wrote
by
a
name, no.
okay. He's like the guy that came. He wrote the Sumerian. He was like a Sumerian anthropologist that interpreted their religion as there being this ninth planet called Nibiru, or no, 10th planet called Nibiru, and aliens came from Nibiru and came to America and basically enslaved monkeys and made them harvest gold for their planet. And then he mated. They genetically modified monkeys with half alien, half monkey to create humans, and it's like this big conspiracy thing. But it all started with this book that this guy named Zachariah Sitchin wrote in like the '90s. So they were all into that. So like that's like total prison culture. Like there was like a 30-person line to read Zachariah Sitchin's, and yeah, philosophy. Political theory, all kinds of stuff. I mean, there were guys like that. I mean, there were smart guys that just can't get their shit together.
Yeah. What some guys like being there? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. There's people that can't. I didn't want to leave. I mean, when I knew my day. I eventually, they dropped my case. I beat my case, and then I just settled for a 6-month violation. And I knew when I was leaving, and the last month I didn't want to leave. And I'm not saying that I'm some hardened, like institutionalized guy. Like I did 6 months. It's not that big of a deal. But I was homeless going in, so I just didn't. I simply didn't. I liked sleeping inside, so I was like, I don't really want to go back out. But there's other guys that it's just there's something about like it's basically summer camp. If you can survive it, it's basically like a men's summer camp, and there's people that get really used to that and they can't function on the outside. They can't function paying an electricity bill. They can't function getting a job. They're nobody on the outside, but when they're on the inside, they're somebody. So that's like that plagues you. If you're somebody big on the inside, you're probably going to stay inside most of
Yeah.
your life because it's you're the king inside, and then you get out, and you can't get a job at Walmart. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
yeah,
that's like I guess that's like being on Twitter. You go on Twitter and people finally care who you are.
exactly, yeah,
You can't
yes,
ever quit. No one, no
no,
one in your family and people around you don't care about your takes on like gender relations, but people online do.
yeah, exactly. Like it's like this other world where you can be that celebrity and wield that power, and then when you get out, you're nobody. So
Yeah, and that's I mean the movie has that kid from he's coming back from Afghanistan. That's sort of his deal too. Like he says in the movie that I don't remember exactly how he says it, but basically he's like I don't really want to be in a gang. I don't want to do crime, but I want to be like part of something. And you leave the military and you lose that, and so like working with the working with the Aryan Brotherhood or whatever is kind of a substitute for that.
yeah, well, I think the politics and the rules of prison derive heavily from the military. I think it was a lot of these gangs formed around the Vietnam War, and I think a lot of people are coming back from the Vietnam War, and I just think there's a lot of roots in that, and there is a sense of like camaraderie in jail or a gang. And I think people, and when I was in there, there was a ton of vets in there. In fact, there were so many vets in LA County Jail that there was 10 dorms, each 100 people. There was one dorm, it was just called the vet dorm. And they just, if you were a vet, you went in there, but there was more than 100 vets. So they'd overflow into other dorms. But like, I couldn't believe that all these vets were, it's like, I mean, that's a sign that there's like a societal problem when you have young vets are making up over 10% of your prison population.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And part of that, the I'm interested in the fact that they're grouping them together. I guess the management or whatever of the facility is happy to group them together because it seems counterintuitive in some ways, like to let people with these common experiences be together, but that's just the lower conflict option.
I think that a lot of vets, when they go in there, they can't adjust to the race gang politics. They will automatically just respect anyone, regardless of race, if they're a vet, over whether they're a member of their own gang. So it's more of like a gang politics situation where
Okay.
they just kind of, because I heard in the vet dorm, they don't really abide by the typical jail politics. It's like run very differently.
Well, and the U.S. military is is one of the most like diverse environments where people are actually expected to work with, like we're basically white guys and black guys and Mexican guys actually do work together.
Yeah.
Whereas most people get on some sort of career track where they're kind of just working with people like themselves.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. No, I mean, a lot of like Vietnam vets or, talk about how like, they were racist and they went to Vietnam and, had to, their life was saved by a black guy. It's like, it's true, I guess, that it's like we see no color in the military to some extent. Yeah. If you're in war with somebody, you're probably not concerned. You don't want to be concerned about that kind of stuff.
and then I think I heard you talk about this somewhere else, but and you've already sort of alluded to it here, but you have like a Jewish background, right?
Yeah. I'm half Jewish, half Irish.
But like in even among like these white gangs who ostensibly some of the members might have, they might be interested in like neo-Nazism or something like that. They didn't
Yeah.
really care, right? In the actual prison environment.
No, they didn't really care at all, and I might attribute it to the fact that I don't look Jewish. I mean, I just look like a normal white guy. I think if I looked like Sam Bankman-Fried, they wouldn't have been cool to me. And I'm just being honest. I mean, I think physiognomy like plays a lot. I mean, I hate to say that, but I just think it is an incredibly important. It's one of the most important factors that we subconsciously take into account for every interaction, really. So, if I looked like him, I think it would have been a problem. I think it would have been a lot more of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I looked like them, and I acted like I wasn't in there because I embezzled money from the bank, from like my bank, or
Yeah.
I mean, not to make a stereotype or whatever, but
You didn't do a Jewish crime.
yeah, no, exactly. So they were kind of like flabbergasted. I mean, first of all, when I went in there, I didn't know that, so they just asked me if I was German, and I said yeah. And the skinhead guy, like the big skinhead guy was like, he was like, "Yo, okay, we got a purebred on our hands. This is great." And and then after like a few weeks, I noticed that there was a guy with a kosher meal box that he got for lunch and dinner, and it was worth a lot of money. People would like line up to buy it from him, and so I talked to him. I was like, "Are you Jewish? I see that there's like Hebrew on your box." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm Jewish." And this guy was like he was like an ATM robber guy. Like he didn't look Jewish either, but he was like, "Oh yeah, you get the kosher meal, of course. Like you got to get the kosher meal. It's worth a ton of money." So eventually I went to my shot caller and I sort of came clean and was like, "Hey, I just want to let you know I'm Jewish." And I was like, "Well, technically I'm half Jewish. My mom's Irish." And he was like, "I don't," I thought they were going to like beat the fuck out of me. And he didn't care at all. He was just like, "I care that you lied. You shouldn't have lied. That's fucked up." But he's like, "I really like the kosher meatballs, the chicken meatballs that come in on Thursdays. Like, just give me the kosher meatballs on Thursdays. That will be like your sort of like your tax, like you're paying up to but for, the other 6 days, it's yours. You do whatever you want with it. You sell it to, you gotta sell it. You got to give priority to the Peckerwoods when you're selling it, or the
Uh-huh.
Nazis." But if no Nazi or no Peckerwood wants to buy it, you're allowed to sell it to the other races. And it really wasn't a thing. And they were pretty enamored by me, especially at first. The Southsider shot caller was. I mean, they were just like, "What is a Jew doing here? Like, how did this happen? Like, don't you own the jail? Like, don't can't you make a phone call? Like, what is going on?" Because like I said, I was in there for pretty grimy crime, and I was very grimy. I mean, I was dirty, I was filthy, I was cracked out. Uh, and that's just another story. But like, jail taught me to be clean, and
Yeah.
present myself well and fold my clothes, and but that's another story. But so that they were so amazed that like a Jewish guy or a half Jewish guy or whatever, it was just one of them sort of. And I've told the story before, but I'll just very quickly, I'm not kosher, I'm not religious, but you sort of have to pretend to be to get the kosher meal. So I did what I had to do. And they give you a yarmulke, which is like a Jewish hat.
Hmm.
And, I don't wear a yarmulke, so I just like put it under my pillow or something. But someone saw it and they were like, the Mexican shot caller was like asked a bunch of questions about it. And he'd never like really met a Jewish guy besides like public defenders and lawyers and stuff. So he was really fascinated by it and kind of under the impression that it might have had like magical powers. And he requested that he could wear it when he gambled. And, I let him do it. So he'd wear it when he gambled. And then the Nazis were like, well, hold on. Like, you're betraying your race. Like, you got to let us, I want to wear it, when I gamble. So, and I can't like prove this. I didn't have a camera or anything, but like, John from Lancaster, big Nazi with swastika tattoo, would wear my yarmulke while he gambled. And if he won, he'd like, he'd be hugging me and, calling me his Jewish friend. And they didn't give a shit. They just didn't care.
Yeah.
They were pretty chill. And because it's really not, it's not like they weren't like Richard Spencer Nazis. They were just guys from like blue collar areas, and their dads were meth heads, and they just like joined a gang, and that's just what
Yeah. I
That's it.
wonder, I wonder what these people who align with various ideologies, and I tell this to people around me all the time in real life. Like they say, I think there was some school, it was in the news, like, oh, someone drew swastikas on the wall in the bathroom in the school. And the people I was with were like, oh, anti-Semitism has gotten so bad that people just feel, bold enough to do that now. And I was taking the angle. I'm just like, well, this was probably a Mexican kid or a black kid, and he's just having fun. Like he doesn't have a concept of what he's even doing. Like, and
Yeah, totally.
that's the impression I get. A lot of these ideologies, people are just playing around, kind of. I don't know if like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, like, listen, we don't have to like dive into it, but it's like, obviously there's like things get overblown. And, my people like to, make it's like you are kind of ingrained in your head as a kid, like everyone's out to get you, but like, you're right. I mean, it's an extreme thing to do. Like, you're not going to drive a smiley face. You want to be naughty. We did it. Like, kids at my school did it. Fucking, it's like just an extreme thing that you can. It's like Kanye wearing the MAGA hat. I just think it was like he was like the seventh grader drawing the swastika in the bathroom. Like, it's just like this symbol of like, I'm badass. I'm doing a naughty thing.
I assume there are some. Maybe you came across some guys. Maybe you weren't there long enough, but there's got to be some guys who for whom it is like a serious thing, and they do really like deeply study. I don't know, Mein Kampf or stuff like that. But did you come across guys like that?
Yeah, no. Listen, these Nazis were fans of Hitler. They were fans of like the 14 words or whatever. And yeah, they studied, like, I would call it like neo-Nazism, or they practiced like a form of neo-Nazism. And they were, I mean, John explained it. He was like, listen, we're cool with everybody. We just want to preserve the white race. We just want to like, we just don't want you guys marrying our sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by today's standards, that's like I guess to some people that's like horrific. I was like, all right, man, like that's fine. I mean, I don't care, you know. But so it was like this. And John was probably particularly like low IQ. I did like him, but you know, when I first went in there, him and my shot caller sort of explained to me the whole rules, and they were like, you can share foods, you can't share food with the black guys, but you can share food with the Mexicans. And I was like, why? And he like pointed at a Mexican guy, and he's like, because his hair is straight. He's like, they're basically like brown versions of us. Which is just like a funny way to describe it. But like yeah, they were definitely like I was a 19th century Germanic history major, and like probably knew more about, not that Hitler was in the 19th century, but like I probably knew more about like the roots of Nazism and Hitler himself. And these guys weren't like learned really, but yeah, they were like, yeah, they definitely subscribed to like actual Nazi beliefs, but like they're not on 4chan.
Hmm.
You know, like they don't even know what 4chan is. I mean, like, you know, it's just a completely, they're in a gang. That's it.
Yeah,
You know.
and yeah, I think yeah, and a lot of people end up in a gang just where they're at in their life. It feels some sort of need at that moment, and that's maybe becomes the track they ride. But it wasn't necessarily, they weren't googling like groups that don't like Jews or something that I can
Yeah,
join.
I don't think they were like out committing hate crimes. I mean, the movie actually accurately kind of like, listen, there's guys in the movie with swastikas and all that, and like it's not even really mentioned because it isn't. It wasn't when I was there. I mean, it's just not. It's
Yeah, I
just
don't
like
think the
really
movie
strange.
shows any really hate crimes. It's not like American History X or anything.
No, I don't think like P9 is going around and committing hate crimes on synagogues. Like I don't even think they think about that. You know, they're just, it's Bloods. It's just like being in the Bloods or the Crips. It's just a gang. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I peppered you with questions about the life, and I know you've answered some of those questions and talked about some of that stuff on other shows. So, thank you for humoring me.
Oh yeah, of course.
And we've barely talked about the movie, which is kind of fine. That's how I this show. Sometimes it's more about the movie. Sometimes it's more about the guest and their life and stuff. But let's talk about the movie a little bit more.
Yeah.
What I guess what's your history with it? When did you see it, and kind of what's your review?
Yeah, well, I last time I got out of jail in 2016. I think it came out in 2017.
Yeah,
I remember I had a girlfriend. I was at her apartment. I think I lived at her apartment. Okay, so I basically got high a couple times after I got out of jail, and kind of fucked myself up and had some consequences. But I was living at this girl's place, and she had Amazon Prime, and I saw it. I saw Shot Caller pop up, and I recognized the guy from Game of Thrones, and I watched it. I was blown away. You know that how close to accurate it was, and I just loved it.
yeah,
And I watched it probably 2 years later, and you know I was really fresh at that point. It was probably like 2017, 2018 when I saw it on Amazon, so I still pretty fresh in my mind, and a lot of things just hit me. Like I don't know if you remember, like he's in the diner and he has to like perfectly put his napkin and his knife and his fork
yeah,
on, like that is like, there's just something about when you're in jail, all you have is like your dignity sort of, and all you have is like your ability. Like everyone has the same clothes, so it's like everyone's like, I'm gonna like, you can't iron your clothes, but you like fold them under the bed and like press them and everything, and like people are trying to look good because it's kind of all you have. And you sort of develop a sense of OCD because all you can do sometimes is clean your area. And it's, and I didn't really get this because I didn't go for that long, but I that was very accurate. You know, I know people that had been there for a really long time, and yeah, I mean, if you know a guy that was in prison for 10 years, like he's usually not a slob.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know.
And I was going to ask you, but if you adopt it, I mean, maybe you weren't there long enough, but in the movie, he comes out, he goes in an investment banker, and he comes out with a handlebar mustache, slick back hair, and I don't know if this is correct, but I would associate like his the way he wears his shirt, with the collar button to the top, like
Yeah.
cholo style or whatever. Um, like, did you come out with a new style? Did you like pick up some of that, like some of that aesthetic or something?
Yeah, you know, I was never hard or anything. You know, I was on Skid Row. I was a homeless like junkie, but I wasn't like hard, and
Yeah,
nor am I hard now. but but yeah, you go in there and you kind of like first of all, you just there's no better feeling than like the hardest guys you ever met in your life accepting you. You
Oh
know, so
yeah.
I totally like listen, this guy went in there, he had to join the Peckerwoods, some shit went down, he had to sort of like this was like realistic, that could have happened, and I could see people being like, I'm fucking going all in on this, you know. But yeah, so when I got out, first of all, I'd gained so much weight that I didn't fit in the clothes I was arrested in, so they had to give me like a paper suit. But yeah, I never really had facial hair before I went in there. You know, when I was homeless, I'd just kind of let it grow and then I'd shave it when I could. But you know, yeah, I grew like a prison goatee, you know, like long twirly at the bottom, and I kind of like had that for a while after I got out, and and then I got really into like Dickie shorts, like long Dickie shorts, and you know, flannels buttoned up, and because I didn't know who I was, you know, it was like an identity. I was just a junkie, like young 20, like 20, mid 20s, and I did try to like kind of do that thing for a few years where it's like I'm gonna have like the weird goatee and like the long Dickie shorts with the
Uh-huh.
bands on, and I don't really, you know, I'm completely different now, but yeah, and like the folding, making my bed every day. You know, one thing is like I fucking wash my hands after I use the bathroom, no matter what. Um, I can't. I wash my shoe. I clean my shoes. Like you know, I make sure that I'm not a mess. These are things that I sort of learned I mean, I never washed my shoes once until I was in jail.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I saw the movie. I don't know. I didn't see it when it came out, but I saw it at least 3 or 4 years ago, and yeah, I think it's really cool. It's got a it's you know it's a prison movie, so there's an element of brutality to it, but it's like it's fitting. It's not excessive. I don't really think, but it is it's intense at parts. But I sort of found the story about so our main character Money, the way that he responds, sort of like, well, I'm just gonna set my family free. Um, like like I would say that that was the that's like the wrong way to do it. Like and his family didn't want him to do that, but I understand that impulse totally. Like there's these people who rely on you or something, and you screw up big time. Like I understand the impulse to just be like, well, just be done with me. Let me move on. You know, you guys need to move on and let me do the thing that I have to do now. So I found that like a compelling story.
Yeah. I think it's really because I noticed that they show like the first instance of that, and they do a flashback, and they show him. You know, he killed a guy,
Yeah,
and I think it was kind of like to me, it was like okay, he changed forever after he stabbed that guy,
yeah,
and I think he was just like, listen, it's a lot easier when you're like a shitty person, and then you go to jail, and then you get out, and your family, and then you go back to your family because you were already kind of a shitty person, but that's a 180 right there, what he went through, and I think he just couldn't handle being a guy that I mean, he'd murdered multiple people by that point, and he couldn't, he didn't want to fuck his son's life up.
yeah. And the movie sets this mousetrap for him, where basically, unless he unless he ascends to the top, unless he becomes basically like the you know state of California corrections department shot caller, and unless he becomes like the top shot caller, he's always going to have this shadow. Like the gang is always going to be expecting him to do things, and they're always going to be threatening his family. So, I mean, maybe that's not a realistic mousetrap, or maybe it is, but but I did find that like it's at least an interesting story. Like he's like, well, I gotta just my only option now is to take over. I have to take over
Yeah.
this whole thing to ensure that my family is untouched by this thing.
Well, yeah, he kills the one guy that threatened his family
Yeah.
and replaces him. So no one, you know, yeah, no, that's exactly, you know, it's now listen, what I've done at that, you know, I'm not defending the way that he handled it, but that's kind of the fascinating component, you
But it's a
know.
bit like I mean, it's a bit like I mean, he was in Game of Thrones, right? It's a bit like an epic, not a fantasy epic, maybe kind of like a fantasy epic or something where we're just like stories of kings and knights and stuff where you have to you have to go all the way on this sort of fulfill your destiny, and it does not meet neatly with like modern concepts of like making your wife and children happy.
Yeah,
But it was like his his destiny, I guess. He had to just ascend to the top. That was fulfilling his I guess his cosmic purpose or something.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree, and just like it's a character arc. You know, like a lot of movies just don't have a character arc really, but like, man, this guy has an arc. You know, it's
Yeah,
pretty fascinating.
yeah. He like descends into hell, and he comes out, but not in the way. But he comes out, permanently changed, and he's at least in the logic of the movie, he's there's nobility in the thing that he does and the path that he takes. Although I think most people in modern life would take issue with his approach, but in the logic of the movie, at least, there's nobility and heroism in how he solves the problem.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a journey. There's a good journey there.
yeah, yeah. No, there is. Yeah, and that's why I think it was like better than Felon, and it's just a really good jail movie. Really,
Yeah, actually. Oh, well, since we're there, what are your other like, I guess, jail movies that you like?
there's a movie called Blood In, Blood Out, which actually came out I think 1 year before American Me, and there's almost like an odd amount of similarities. I mean, it's a movie about like Hispanic kids growing up in L.A. Both movies are sort of not identical, but they're very similar. And that one is, I mean, it's like 3.5 hours, and it is amazing.
Is
But
that
then, oh, go ahead.
I think that okay? So I think I have not seen it, but I think it has an alternative title, "Bound by Honor." If anyone
Yes,
looks it up,
it does. Yeah,
okay, I haven't seen that one, but I added that to my list as well. But yeah, I heard that one
yeah.
was really good.
And someone in Shot Caller was in Blood and Blood Out. Billy Bratt, I think his name is. He's he was a
No.
sheriff with the mustache, the Mexican sheriff with the mustache
Oh, okay.
in Shot Caller. So
Oh
he's
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So he's like a main character in that Blood and Blood Out. Let me see another prison movie. I mean, listen, I love God. What is that movie with Brad Pitt and Dennis Hoffman from the Sleepers?
Oh yeah.
It's not really a prison movie, but there is elements of like I guess juvenile hall. But I love that movie.
I mean, growing up, I was obsessed with Shawshank. I
Yeah,
mean,
Shawshank's great.
1960s or whatever, 50s, but
Yeah, no, that's obviously that's just an unbelievable movie. There's a movie with Edward Furlong and God, the Green Goblin. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Willem Dafoe. That's a pretty fabulous prison movie. Uh, Pretty fabulous. Willem Dafoe is sort of like the shot caller. Edward Furlong is 18. He goes into prison, and they almost develop like a unsexualized romance. I'd call, or like almost
uh-huh.
like a brotherly love that borders on creepy. But it's a really good portrayal of
Animal
um,
Factory.
Animal Factory, and I believe Tom Arnold has a cameo in it. It
I've
is
not seen that one,
amazing.
but I did come across that one as well.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty
Directed
low
by
budget.
Steve Buscemi.
What's that?
Directed by Steve
Oh,
Buscemi.
yes, yes, directed by Steve Buscemi. Sort of low budget, but really good. Tom Arnold plays like a madman rapist in prison. Yeah, and he does a great job.
Yeah, this is a kind of thing Furlong was supposed to be in. It's too bad he couldn't be in more prison movies. He has
Yeah,
a he has a
I think
face
he
for
just
it.
became a terrible drug addict.
Yeah, yeah,
Is what I think. Obviously, Midnight Express, fabulous prison movie. More, obviously they're in Turkish prison,
yeah.
but man, that's a great movie. And then I recently saw a movie about a guy that goes to prison in Thailand, I believe, with Jim Gaffigan playing a heroin dealer.
Oh,
And I
really?
wish I could remember the name of that. And I couldn't believe Jim Gaffigan's kind of doing a run at acting, and he's taking some serious roles, and I thought he was great.
Yeah, he's good in that Chappaquiddick Kennedy movie.
Yeah.
Most Wanted, it looks like that's the one.
Yes. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
I've not seen it, but
Josh
yeah,
Hartnett.
Josh Hartnett, Jim
Yeah.
Gaffigan.
Yeah. And Josh Hartnett's coming back, I guess. I think he has some big movie coming out.
Yeah, he's in the new Shyamalan movie, Shyamalan movie,
Yes.
however you
Yeah,
say it.
yeah, he is. So that's always cool when someone comes back. Man, prison. Okay, like an example of like an inaccurate prison portrayal in the movie, I guess would be Butterfly Effect when Ashton Kutcher goes to prison and he has to like suck the guy's dick. I just don't think there's like crazy amounts of rape happening. From what I've
That's
heard.
I'm happy to hear that. I mean, that's because that was always it's always one of those jokes or cliches or whatever. And I always wonder, I'm like, you know, I don't know. I just I don't think so many people are turned so easily.
No, and there's definitely in some prisons I think are much different in other parts of the country, but at least in California that is not happening. I don't, that's the word on the street is that that doesn't really happen. And
So
but yeah,
um is it so California is obviously arguably or probably the most liberal state. Like, yet it sounds like their prison system is maybe not the most liberal. And but
yeah.
is that like it's almost as if like the Mexican gangs have like a an effect where they actually push the system rightward or something is.
Yeah, well, people don't understand. Yeah, California is incredibly liberal because there's a lot of upper class white people with money that are liberal. But there is a working class in California, and there's a huge Hispanic working class. And as much as some people don't want to believe me, like members of my family, when I tell them this, but a lot of Hispanic people aren't liberal.
Yeah.
And, they are not liberal in jail. And I'll tell you one thing: it's jail's incredibly homophobic. Uh, Not that I'm like offended by that, or I mean, you're in jail, so like, yeah, it's a homophobic place. It's a pretty high testosterone alpha place. So
Yeah,
yeah,
like
there's no like
definitionally,
pronouns
like
going on. Yeah,
I've seen like those studies where it's like yeah, like excess testosterone is like not excess but high levels, it's more criminality or something.
yeah, yeah. If you were caught being liberal in jail, you'd get the shit kicked out of you. It's like, I mean, not that I ever saw it, but like, there's no like I'm riding with Biden in jail. I don't think. I mean, I just no. What was so fascinating was I was in jail from 2015 to 2016, and we got TV. We'd watch the news, and Trump was kind of coming to rise,
Uh-huh.
and that was a fascinating thing to watch because people were getting scared because it was like this was like the old Trump when he was like. For some reason, when he was running, he was like all about the Mexicans.
Yeah.
And then he kind of like dropped it once he actually became president. But so it was during that time, and it was kind of getting weird. Where like, yeah, some of the Mexicans were kind of getting pissed about Trump, and then some of the white guys. There was one guy that I was in there with who was probably the smartest person I was in there with, and he in 2005 it was like December 2015 or something, January 2015. He was the one guy that I met the entire time in there where he said Trump's going to be president. And we were
Uh,
like, "You're fucking crazy. You're an idiot." And he wasn't. He was like, "I like Trump." He wasn't like super Trump or anything, but he was like, "Watch, you watch. That guy's going to be president." And I'll tell you, it was weird. Like the white guys and the Nazis, they weren't like when Trump would come on TV. It's not like everyone would start cheering and clapping or anything. It was people are pretty apolitical actually. Um, but yeah, sorry that's kind of a tangent. But
no, it's interesting
yeah,
because you don't hear like you don't hear that. I mean, I know that like I remember and I think this might be one of the anecdotes that the good old boys share sometimes, but like in the DC, I think it's the DC like jail network or prison network or whatever, like the old like mayor of DC, Marion Barry, would go around. The convicts couldn't vote or whatever, but he would go to the families and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna lessen the sentences and stuff." So like he kind of made the criminals like he made the incarcerated like a bargaining chip with like locals to vote for him. Like I'll get your family out of jail basically.
Yeah, smart move.
Yeah.
But well, that's what's all ironic about it is because obviously Biden drafted the crime bill of '94. I believe him and Clinton. I guess Clinton did the three strike. I might be wrong about that, but Clinton might have contributed to the three strike rule, which was utilized heavily in California.
Hmm.
And then Biden became president. But what I'm curious. Oh yeah, so socially, prison is probably the most conservative you can ever get, and the inner gang politics are almost like fascistic. I mean, there's like an authoritarian leader that you sort of follow. Um, but I do get curious about the BLM era of 2020, like what jail was like. I don't. I think they just let everyone out of jail during COVID, so I don't think there was a lot going on anyway. But um,
Yeah, the
that.
dynamics must be quite a bit different. I mean, other parts of the country, like as many liberals are like to point out, the jail population is like I don't know 80% black or 60 or 70 or something. So without that Mexican influence that you see in California and probably Texas or something,
Mhm.
uh, where a jail is like 70% black, it probably is just a very different dynamic.
Yeah. And listen, I don't blame anybody. I mean, when you go to jail, the dynamics are sort of shifted where uh, I'm not trying to, like obviously, like in America, when you 'cause traditionally, like we've seen most people in power, like are usually white. I mean, the majority of the population was white, and when you go to jail, it's sort of it's flipped on its head, and the Mexicans have the most power, and the white people have the least amount of power, and another interesting thing is that usually the more upper class or middle upper class a white person is when they were in jail, the less likely their family would be in sending them money.
Hmm.
And the people that got the most money were probably the poorest people in jail, were the poorest people on the streets, and because it's like they're almost like their families are maybe used to going to jail, and it's sort of like we have to keep like a nest egg for when someone goes to jail. Whereas, I don't come from money and I didn't even really have family at the time, but no one sent me money. There was no one to
Yeah.
call, but like there was white kids in there that were like from rich families that didn't get a dollar the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, because it's almost like their families are so ashamed by the fact that they went to jail.
Yeah. I don't think I have much more to say about the movie. I did remember one thing though, which is the movie does also feature a prominent a Jewish guy who's uh, part of a white prison gang, which is John Bernthal. So
Oh yeah.
and he
Yeah,
he's
he's
actually
good at playing white supremacist guys or whatever.
yeah, and he's built a career off of being like some vaguely Italian something, but
Yeah,
he's a he's a Jewish guy from DC, and he's got a very wealthy family. I think like his brother is married to like the lady who used to run Facebook for Mark Zuckerberg, and like his dad is a famous lawyer and stuff. Anyway,
damn.
so but he's very good at seeming like a working class like Italian guy. But
Yeah, frankly, I love him as an actor.
he
I
he brings he brings an awesome energy to this movie. He's like
yeah,
he's always doing stuff with his hands, like
yeah.
um
He is just, and he is so under stress, and you can see it. And it's even before it's revealed that he's like a kind of an informant or whatever, like cutting a deal with the feds or whatever. God, you just know that something bad is going on with him. He is so physical.
yeah, and he's
Um,
got that great like I don't know if I've been around. I've known a bunch of people like this, usually in the context of like sports. But they're kind of like an anxious but gregarious jock kind of guy. Like he's got this weird combo of traits, but it's good.
yeah, and there are guys like that in there. There's these guys that are like you just know you don't fuck with them. They're like they could explode at any point, and like gouge your eyes out. They won't fight fair. You know, like they're just like dangerous humans that are like a gyrating ball of negative energy. And he like perfectly encapsulated that. There are people in there where like, you know, you try to avoid them. Like they're dangerous people, and they probably belong in prison. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, but John, I think in real life, I know that he has a podcast. I mean, he might be a douche in real life. I don't know. I've listened to the Shia LaBeouf episode of his podcast. He's kind of like some rich guy that bought like a horse farm or something, and it's like a pretend cowboy guy. But he seems pretty cool. I didn't know he came from wealth like that, but
Yeah, he went to school with Chelsea Clinton and stuff like that.
oh
Like,
wow, okay,
yeah, his family is like inner circle, like DNC type stuff. But
yeah.
but,
Well, listen,
but
I don't know anything. I cut my dad's Jewish, but he's like a union carpenter from son of a auto body guy, and like we're just like working class, the one working class Jew in America.
yeah. Michael Mann's the other one. I remember I was reading something about him. His family was poor in Chicago, but yeah, I like Bernthal. He's great in the.
Yeah, love him.
He's great in most things. So
Yeah, he you know what? He's really good in Sicario. He's in it for like 10 minutes.
yeah,
Fucking so good.
yeah, that's yes, and he beats up a woman or fights a woman.
God damn, he's good in that.
Yeah,
I can't even like, what else is he in? He's in Fury. He's great in Fury. Another like kind of working class Gentile.
yeah, and he plays like an Italian guy in Wolf of Wall Street. Anyway,
Yeah.
That's I think that's about it. All I have. Did you have any other takes on Shot Caller?
No, listen, I loved it. I give respect to the director. Like I said, everything down to the linguistics of the slang terms that are used, very accurate. The tattoos are very accurate. The guy put his research in. It's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. I'd give it the most accurate portrayal of Southern California prison gang culture on film.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on. Everyone go pre-order Crooked Smile on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description. But until next time, you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
we don't have to talk about prison stuff or drug stuff, but you got a lot of insight. So
no, I love movies. I'll talk about movies. I fucking love movies. And no, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, thank you very much.